Do you know what, right? When this car came out, I thought, oh, very nice, very pretty, very luxurious for BMW. But 25 grand more than a BMW 5 Series for fundamentally the same car. You have got to be having a laugh. But now, after just 3 years of depreciation, this is basically the same price as a BMW 540i Touring. So, is this BMW 840i now worth the money? Let's find out. My name's Tom and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. First up, engine then. This being the BMW 840i means we have the lovely, very smooth B58 turbo inline 6. This is the same engine that you get in, well, a lot of BMWs in all honesty, but there's a reason for that. It is glorious. In this 840i, it makes 333 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque, which, if you look closely, is actually 50 more newton meters than you get in the 540i. Why BMW did that? I don't know. Maybe to make this car worth it. One thing is for sure though, and that is that the B58 is known to perform better than the numbers would suggest. Let's do the 30 to 70 sprint and see how she does. So then, how did we do on the 30 to 70 sprint? Well, the BMW 840i Grand Coupe managed a very respectable time of 4.31 seconds. And for a B58 powered car that weighs just over 1.8 tons, I think that's pretty decent. However, looking closer, you'll notice the 2019 BMW X4 N40i was very slightly quicker. And that's because it has the newer B58 engine with 360 horsepower instead of 333 horsepower. I do find it weird that the 8 Series, which is like supposed to be pinnacle BMW, didn't get the updated B58 engine. Very odd that. But anyway, it's still a pretty quick car. Right, let's now have a look at the interior. And first things first, compared to a 5 Series at least, you don't really notice much of a difference. I mean, you get a slightly more swoopy center console, which looks quite nice. But then if you look further, you do notice you get a slightly finer grain of leather as standard, which is very much needed, I think, especially if you were buying one of these from new. But anyway, let's get it started up. Once started, and once you've looked around the rest of the interior, you'll notice that this is indeed very similar to a BMW 5 Series, which is no bad thing. But again, if you were buying this car from new, I think you'd feel pretty shortchanged. It's only after that 3 years of depreciation that it really feels like you're getting value for money. As standard, you get a heads-up display, which you can kind of see just there. You get adaptive dampers, and of course you get this nice leather. But then the rest of it, apart from this swooping dash and, you know, some slightly different air vents and some different speaker designs and a split panoramic roof, you don't really get much that's different. But anyway, enough complaining. Let's talk about the things that I actually like about this interior. Number one has to be pretty much my favorite feature in any car, and that is simply the max AC button. There's nothing better than getting in a car on a hot day and being able to just cool down straight away. Then number two is that we have these little capacitive touch buttons where you can actually assign specific features to, which is really nice if you want to change things in your Apple CarPlay or look at your tyre pressures quickly. Everything's just fast to access. Then you get a very conveniently placed USB port and some grippy cup holders. A lot of cars don't come with these little grippy bits, and they make all the difference, especially if you're going over some bumpy UK roads. So although the front of the cabin is very similar to a 5 Series, it's still very nice. But would you say it's worth it yet? Let's have a look at the back and see what it's like. Now then, this is where the 8 Series is a little bit of a mixed bag for me, because whilst you get plenty of legroom, and I mean lots of legroom, the headroom just isn't that good. I'm 5'11", and as you can see, I don't really get much room. If you're 6 foot or above in this thing, you're really going to struggle to get comfortable. And the thing is, you can slouch, but then the back of the seat doesn't really support your back much, so you kind of just end up being uncomfortable. So for me then, the rear of this car is still compromised, and it's not as good as the BMW 5 Series. What is nice though is that we get USB-C charging, very modern, very nice. We get another Max AC button, so you get your own climate controls, your own heated seats, a little bit of ambient lighting, and you get a very nice armrest, which has some very fancy cup holders and some felt-lined storage so things don't rattle around when you leave stuff in there. But again, this you get in the 5 Series. I know that you technically don't as standard, but is it worth it? Coming to the boot as well, unfortunately, it's kind of a similar story. You do get 440 litres of space, which is decent, but then it's not a proper hatchback style tailgate, which for me at least would actually impact my buying process. Because what happens if I've bought a new fridge and I can't get the rest of this bit of glass to go up? If I could probably fit it in, but because I can't, not ideal. That's where the 5 Series Touring is definitely better than this. Then, apart from some nettage, you don't really get anything else. You do get some tie-down points, but you don't get a 12-volt socket, you don't get shopping hooks, and you don't get underfloor storage under the boot floor either, which is a bit pants really. Then, when you fold the rear seats down, you have to do it by hand with these levers, and to actually fold them down, you actually have to climb into the boot and push them down yourself. Thankfully, they don't get stuck on the way down, and you do get a pretty flat load floor, but it just doesn't feel that premium. What am I getting over a standard BMW with this very expensive 8 Series? Is it the electric boot? No, it is the looks. Of course, unlike the 5 Series, you do get a absolutely massive, over 5 metre long Grand Coupe. And to me at least, it does definitely look better than the 5 Series. And now, after 3 years of depreciation, as I mentioned earlier, they're pretty much the same price. But for me at least, I don't think its looks make up for the fact it doesn't really have proper space for 2 more adults in the back, and it doesn't really have a very good boot, especially when you compare it with the 540i Touring. Is it better to drive though? Let's take it on some UK roads now and find out. So far then, it's not actually looking that good for the BMW 8 Series so far, despite the fact it looks very, very nice. Anyway, going around town in comfort mode, we got adaptive dampers as standard, which is a very nice feature. In comfort mode, it feels very comfortable and very similar to a 5 Series with adaptive dampers. I wonder why that is. Anyway, let's whack it into sports now to see if we can see or feel any difference. So steering sharpens up, suspension obviously sharpens up, and oh yeah, you can definitely feel the stiffness coming in, especially on the rear axle. Actually, you can really feel that the car settles much quicker. You don't get any kind of pogoing, it's just kind of but done. Yeah, very nice actually. And you know what, it's not actually overly stiff. I'd say it feels very similar to something like a BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe. It's going to be interesting to see if this feels any more dynamic than a 5 Series though. I mean, it's going to have to if it's going to be better than a 5 Series, right? Anyway, back into comfort mode. Seating position is nice and low. The one thing you do notice over the 5 Series in this 8 Series is that the raked windscreen and the slightly smaller viewing port makes this feel sportier, a bit more aggressive, and you do actually feel slightly lower in the car, which is quite interesting. Seats are nice and comfortable though. I can adjust the pitch of the base. I got this nice extendable bit for my thighs, which I have to do manually, which is a bit pants. I think there would be an electric button for that. But steering's nice and light, and overall it's actually pretty easy to drive, despite the fact this thing is over 5 meters long. What's it like to park though? Well, let's first find a parking space. Here we go, there's a nice little parking space here, and see if we can actually fit in the damn thing. So we do have a lot of assist features, but in all honesty, you're going to park yourself like 99% of the time, and doing it yourself is interesting. Plenty of steering angle, which is great. Parking sensors are nice and accurate, but this is a big boy. Getting into a British-sized car parking space is not an easy feat in this thing. I'm pretty close to that Tesla. I don't really want to be much closer to that Peugeot. And in all honesty, even once I'm in the space, I don't really feel like I'm in it. In fact, I think the front end is actually sticking out. Sorry. This guy wants to get in his car. And getting out, I don't think you're going to be able to get to the first notch on most occasions. And as you saw then, that guy kind of looked at me and went, I can't get in my car. So yeah, if you live in London, I think this car is just a little bit too big, in all honesty. Anyway, coming out of a junction, obviously we've got the B58, loads of low down torque. Let's see if it turns the engine off. Nope, because it knows start stop is pants and takes ages to start the engine in this thing. But anyway, give it half throttle, no X drive in this, just rear wheel drive. And as you can see, you do a little bit of a hop, skip and a jump when you come out of junctions in this thing, which is a shame considering the fact this thing actually has a limited slip differential as standard. That's right, this has the M Sport differential, which is okay. It's an electronically controlled limited slip diff, which I don't really understand in my mind. It's kind of like either it's mechanical and it just locks, or what. Anyway, it seems to work. It definitely works better than the open M limited slip diff in my BMW 140i. Anyway, we're going to test the MPG today, as well as the noise levels in this car with a proper decibel meter. But first, let's reset our MPG. According to BMW, this will do 39 mpg on the combined cycle, which, as efficient as this B58 engine is, I think is absolute tripe. In all honesty, I don't think it's going to get anywhere near that. But anyway, how far will you actually get if you actually do 39 mpg on the combined cycle? Well, a full tank of fuel will get you just over 580 miles. But you're not going to use a full tank, are you? You're going to use 3/4 of a tank. And if you use 3/4 of a tank, that's going to get you around 440 miles. Then in terms of cost, if you use a full tank at £1.45 a litre, I believe that's going to be about £98 to fill up. But again, you're going to use 3/4 of a tank, and I'm pretty sure that's around £78. I'll put the actual numbers on the screen for you now though. So in theory, you could do some pretty long journeys in this thing, but we're going to see if it'll actually do that figure. Of course, before we do that, we've got to do the combined part of this test. So let's take it to a roundabout, get it in Sports Plus, get the traction control off, and let's see if this 8 Series is any more dynamic than a 5 Series. Alrighty then, into Sports Plus. Let's get the traction off. So dampers are stiff, steering is stiff, gearbox is downshifting, more gears, gearbox over into S, and why am I putting my indicator on? I don't need to do that. Just wait for traffic to clear and get our foot down. Ooh, little bit of tyre squeal there, and yeah, it stays pretty flat actually with the dampers in their sportier setting, and acceleration is very decent, very, very decent. Anyway, let's get ourselves into Eco now, get the traction back on, and see what this thing's like on the motorway. Alrighty then, coming onto the motorway in Eco mode, get your foot down, response is good, ZF 8-speed gearbox, it downshifts beautifully, even in Eco. They've definitely calibrated this car to be more comfortable than just outright efficient, I think. Do you know what the other thing I've noticed is as well? In Eco mode, this just has the comfort dash. I don't know if it's actually supposed to have that. Oh well, I prefer the look of this dash anyway. Then once you're on the motorway, you notice that the damping is pretty soft, it's not bumpy or lumpy. Visibility is okay, it's not the best. So at the back, you've got a pretty small window, so if people are right up your bum, you can't really see them in all honesty. Then the wing mirrors, they're okay. You do have a curved bit of glass, so you can just about see your blind spot, but I do think it could definitely be better. Where this car is good though, is wind noise. More importantly, lack of it. This thing has almost zero wind noise, and
Road noise is pretty low too, although not as low as I would expect. Basically like a 5 Series in terms of road noise, but wind noise is definitely less, and that's because this car is just super smooth. It's almost a bullet shaped. Plus you have vents in the front that can actually open and close, so they stay closed for aerodynamics, and then they open if you need a bit of air to go into the engine bay. But yeah, you could easily do 12 hours in this thing and feel absolutely fine. I mean, in all honesty, I'd probably want to do 12 hours in this car. It is lovely. Right then, let's test the MPG of this car and the noise levels with a proper decibel meter. Alrighty then, motorway stint over, and we managed 32 miles per gallon. So that's what you can kind of expect over 14 miles of your average daily commute, with a bit of mixed driving, which I think, in all honesty, is pretty good for a car of this size, especially when you remember this thing weighs 1.8 tons. Yeah, it's a bit of a porker. But yeah, I think the slippery body shape definitely helps. It's definitely a little bit more efficient than the equivalent 540i Touring, I think. I think its aerodynamics really help at motorway speeds. And I think on a longer journey, you might actually get over 40 miles per gallon out of this thing, which is pretty insane. Anyway, let's destroy that figure now. Let's go into Sports Plus, get the traction off again, get us over into S, and do some proper B-road driving, shall we? Right then, brakes. Oh, interesting. Okay, typical BMW thing. They don't really feel that nice, but they do kind of work. Right, let's see what this diff can do. Oh, okay. Yeah, it feels flat, feels controlled. There's not much understeer. And there's quite a bit of oversteer. Yeah, do you know what? I'm feeling it more than the 5 Series. I was not expecting that. We're definitely getting some fake engine noise as well. Brakes again. Yeah, they work. They're massive discs as well, but I just don't like the feel of them that much. Anyway, let's get the sunroof open. See if we can get any noise. Very subdued, really, in all honesty. But the turn-in, the front end on this is very nice. Very, very nice. And when you're hard on the brakes, you can feel the rear kind of pushing out slightly as well. Very controllable. Yeah, you can really go for it in this thing. The adaptive dampers definitely help. And do you know what? I don't know if it's placebo effect from the fact this thing looks a bit sportier than a 5 Series, but to me at least, it's definitely a bit stiffer overall. Definitely feels stiffer. Let's just go around once more just to be sure. Let me take it seriously this time and just be smooth. I mean, yeah, you can catch up to traffic very quickly in this. Yeah, it definitely feels flatter. Oh, that B58 is such a good engine. You really don't need more power than that, honestly. And the thing is, if you do want more power, you know, stage 1 remap, over 400 horsepower in this thing. Oh yeah, by the way, you get gesture control as standard in this car, which is pretty nice. You can do things like that to turn the radio off. Pretty cool. The front end, yeah, front end definitely feels better than a 5 Series. I don't know what it is, but it just seems to bite into the tarmac a little bit better. Steering, I'd have to drive them back to back. The 5 Series is known for not having the best feel, and it definitely doesn't. This is, do you know what, I might say it's marginally better. But again, I really would have to drive them back to back to find out. This handles really nicely though. Gearbox very sharp, very little to complain about. And do you know what? I'd probably pick this one out of all the 8 Series, just because it's rear wheel drive. I think xDrive is great when it's wet or when it's snowing, but I really like a rear-wheel drive car. It just feels nice. And do you know what? It doesn't feel too boaty either. Really like the way this thing handles. I'm going to really put the suspension through its paces now though, and take it to a smaller, very bumpy British B road. Let's see if this big barge can handle well there still. Actually, do you know what? Before we go to a little road, let's do a 0 to 60 test. So, the rear-wheel drive version of this BMW 840i is supposed to do 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds and 0 to 62, or 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, in 5.4 seconds. To get into launch control, you whack the gearbox over into S. You have to be in Sports Plus. Traction needs to be in traction off. So like just press the button once, but not DSC all the way off. Then you put your foot all the way down on the brake, very hard on the brake, then very hard on the throttle, launch control active, let's go. Little loss of traction there. And that's 60. Right, let's pull over and see what we managed. Right then, let's see what the BMW 840i managed. Did we do 5.1 seconds? Oh, no. We did 5.95 seconds. Nearly a second slower. That's not ideal, is it? Well, safe to say I think that's down to traction issues. The roads are pretty dusty at the minute because it's quite dry, so trying to get through first gear, it felt a little bit lumpy. Unfortunately, you can actually see that on the graph here as well. It just doesn't accelerate that hard in first. Oh well, better luck next time. Okay, everything in its sportiest setting. Let's see what this 840i can do, eh? Yeah, you can definitely feel a lack of traction on the rear end. It's interesting considering this thing weighs, you know, north of 1.8 tons. You'd think it would be able to put the power down, even though it's rear-wheel drive. But, Lord, once you're moving, this thing is a proper rocket ship. Unfortunately though, it's a little bit too wide for these B roads. Bit of tyre squeal. Yeah, second and third gear are brilliant though in this. It's just that I'm having to watch the size of it a little bit. But my lord, this thing moves. Alrighty then, can we hit 60 before the corner? Let's go. Short shift into second. And yes, we made it. Oh yeah, it's still a fun car. It's definitely a bit more playful than the 5 Series. Definitely. Interesting. I was expecting it to be quite a bit more similar, but no. It's like, the way I would describe it is just a bigger 4 Series, and you can definitely feel a little bit more weight, but yeah, overall I'm pretty impressed with this thing. Like, in all honesty, a lot of the time I have to put the suspension in its softer setting, but not for this car. It just seems very well calibrated. Getting a nice push from the rear end there. Suspension dealing with bumps well. Yeah. Not too much to complain about, although it definitely feels wide. Brakes, even when they're warm, absolutely stonking. Does that make it worth it though? If I was going to be single, and I knew I was going to be single for the next 10 years, I'd go for this. Do you know what? I would go for this. But for pretty much every other scenario, I think I'd go for a 540i. Even though these are now similar prices, and even though I think this looks better than a 5 Series, definitely turns more heads. I just think the 5 Series, it offers more in the way of practicality, in the way of daily usability, and in the way of not being so long. and in the way of just ease of use as well. Whilst this, feels cool to be in, it's definitely a bit compromised when it comes to, the view out, especially out the sides and the front. The A-pillar is at such an angle that you do get quite a big blind spot. I just don't think it feels special enough. If this was a 6 Series and they had just named it as such, maybe it might sway my decision making a bit more. But I feel like an 8 Series should be like pinnacle BMW. And for me, in all honesty, it's just not doing that. It's definitely worth the money, but I don't know, I just don't think it deserves the name. The fact I'm even thinking about having a 5 Series over this says all you need to know, really. But anyway, if you are interested in this car, it is for sale at Paragon Cars, funnily enough. There'll be a link for the car down below, and if there isn't, unfortunately, it is already sold. It is still a lovely car, and, if you do want something stylish, I think it's better than a 5 Series. For me personally, though, I do think I'd end up with a 540i, because the brain part of me would overrule the heart just very slightly. Anyway, as always, my name has been Tom, and you have been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one, guys. Cheers.